Well, welcome home.
It's good to be back. Good to see you, Carol. Hello, everybody. And to be joined by one of my favorite people, although you're kind of making me look bad with those socks.
Well, I couldn't decide on which color.
Those are great socks. And welcome home to you, Yo-Yo Ma, because this is as much your home as any other place in America.
I love Chicago. You know that.
So our assignment this evening is to discuss the state of the entire world before dinner is served at 7. So we're going to get right to it. And let's begin with this. Volodymyr Zelensky sits bravely in his office in Kyiv. He may not live through this night or this year. What do we know through him about what it might be like to be an unlikely leader, President Obama?
Well, look, when I originally agreed to come here because of the great debt that I owe this city to people like Lester and so many people around this room who supported me, I anticipated that we would be talking about world affairs and some of the troubling trend lines that we've been seeing over the last several years. I did not anticipate that we would be witnessing an epic war taking place on continental Europe that is upending the world as we know it in real time. And so it's a somber moment. There's a sense of distraction. I think it's hard for all of us to sit here witnessing what we're witnessing happening to families, maternity wards blown up, people fleeing with their suitcases, whatever they can stuff in there in a few minutes, and millions of people displaced. And so it's a somber time. And I don't think we can sugarcoat both the human toll that is unfolding in Ukraine, but also how it is reordering the international architecture in ways that we haven't seen in decades. I will say, though, that how President Zelensky has responded, how the Ukrainian people have responded, has at least awakened the world and Europe in particular in a way that indicates how one person, a handful of people, a group of people can move the conscience of the world. And that is, I think, a useful reminder for us that what we're seeing out of the Kremlin, from Putin, from Russia, the sort of mentality of might makes right and strongmen and war and bloodshed and avarice, that's as old as time. But there is another idea that believes in the intrinsic dignity of all people and believes in rule of law and international law and human rights and freedom of conscience and self-determination. And those two ideas have been competing for quite some time. And what's needed in order for the better vision to win out is people like Zelensky being willing to stand up and take enormous risks and make great sacrifices. And so if there's ever been a time in which that kind of leadership a leadership that's grounded in a broader vision about how we should be treating each other and what democracy and freedom mean, I think this is the moment. And he's proven to be the right man at the moment, and it also indicates the degree to which you never know where they're going to come from. Because this guy won Dancing with the Stars in Ukraine
Right.
just a few years ago. And so if somebody who's sort of the Steve Martin of Ukraine can suddenly find their voice in a historic moment like this, that places an obligation on all of us. That means each one of us have a voice that can make a difference at any given moment. So.
And so, Yo-Yo Ma, on Monday in Washington, there you are, outside the Russian embassy. Will you take us through what your thought process was? When did you decide? And what was that decision about?
The decision happened at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. I texted a friend, said, can you give me the address of the Russian embassy and the Ukrainian embassy? I went to the lobby of the hotel, got into a taxi, and said, could you drive me there? The taxi waited. I played. Then I got back into the taxi, went to the Ukrainian embassy, and then I played. And I think, to President Obama's point earlier about unlikely people who can change things, for me, the moment came that you had mentioned earlier, Carol, when President Zelensky said, this may be the last time you see me. In other words, he was willing to put his life on the line. He was not leaving. And he put his family also in harm's way. That's saying a lot. And I'm just wondering how many of us are able to do that. And that comes to the point that I think it's based on character. Okay, he may have been not as good a dancer as you, President Obama.
Michelle doesn't
I know.
dancing.
Michelle, notwithstanding, I hear you're pretty, fleet-footed.
Yo-Yo has seen me dance, and he knows I've got game.
So, no. He doesn't need to wear these socks. He's plenty good on his feet. But I think it's character, and I have to acknowledge something that I've never said in front of anybody else. But when you made your speech in Chicago after winning the election, I thought to myself, if he asked, I would be willing to lay down my life.
I did not.
And thank God you didn't ask.
I didn't ask. I did ask him to play at the inauguration in 7-degree weather, which I don't play the cello. I'm imagining that can't be easy.
It came close. So, as you know, the Chicago Council on Foreign Relations, now the Council on Global Affairs, was born in the 20s as a response to isolationism.
Right.
Now here we are in the midst of the Ukraine war, and there are people in the world wondering if, in fact, Ukraine is looking down the long barrel of the world's isolationism. Is there a new isolationism that's taken hold?
To the contrary, Carol, I think actually Ukraine has snapped the world back into attention after years of complacency. In the United States in particular, I think there is no doubt that the frustrations, the disillusionment, the heavy cost, particularly borne by our troops, in Iraq and Afghanistan made people war-weary, which is understandable. That's 13, 14 years of tens of billions of dollars spent and lives lost and families shattered by wounds and just the sheer exhaustion of it. And I would witness this at Walter Reed and when I visited troops in those places. And so it is natural and proper to be wary of war, because war is a terrible thing, even when you're on the right side of it. But I also think that, people often ask me what surprised me about the United States, or what surprised me about the presidency, something I hadn't anticipated. And the truth was, long hours, gray hair, a recalcitrant Congress, those things did not surprise me. The one thing that did surprise me was the degree to which America still underwrote the world order. That even our critics expected us to behave responsibly on the world stage. And I think there came a period in which, having come out of war, or still in the midst of it, or the tail of it, there was a sense maybe we shouldn't try to solve everybody else's problems because we've got a lot of problems here at home. I think what we're seeing now is a reminder that there is a direct connection between our problems here at home and what happens overseas. It turns out that the same instincts towards authoritarianism, the same instincts of xenophobia, of us versus them, of tribalism, of division, the same manipulation of information and media, the same suppression of conscience and dissent. Those forces that in our country we've seen weaken our democracy, well, that's happening elsewhere. And that doesn't necessarily mean that we have to or have the capacity to police the entire world. But what it does mean is that what we stand for here and what we stand for overseas has a direct connection. And if we are willing to stand up for values like rule of law and democracy and human rights here, then we should be willing to stand up for them overseas as well. That doesn't always have to express itself through our military might. The debates back in the 20s, the 30s, about American involvement in Europe took place in a different era. We can't help but be integrated. Look at what's happening now with respect to the economy of Russia, Europe, China, the United States. They're inextricably linked. Information is flowing continuously, so that Putin can't hide what's happening in Russia. And increasingly, he can't even hide it inside of Russia. So the world has shrunk, and we're going to have obligations beyond our shores, and it will be in our self-interest to act on those values that we hold in common with people like a Zelensky. That's not always going to express itself in terms of us entering into a war. And I think that there have been times where we've had a tendency to think that the only way for us to act overseas is militarily. And in fact, if we're doing a good job engaging diplomatically and economically and culturally, then ideally, the use of our military is the last tool in the toolbox, not the first.
Yo-Yo Ma has instructed me not to call him maestro, and I'm having a really hard time not
Go ahead.
saying it that way, because to call him Yo-Yo just seems not quite right, but I will follow his lead. Back when I was doing the news in Chicago, I would periodically in our newscast end up throwing to a story about Yo-Yo Ma is in Kenwood today. Yo-Yo Ma is in Englewood. Yo-Yo Ma is at St. Sabina's. You have made, if Chicago is not your home, your mission to reach, not for the expensive seats, but the places where the little kids are who don't get to see the Chicago Symphony, don't get to know you, and yet they know you. And this is sort of a question beyond isolationism about empathy, because it seems to me that your mission in life, if I don't misrepresent it, is to provide empathy through music. Do I have that wrong?
I can never contradict you. Of course you're right. When President-elect Obama called me in backstage in Florence to say, would you like to play at my inauguration? I said, obviously, I would love to, but I just have one question for you. Did I read correctly that you thought that there was an empathy deficit in the world? And you didn't say that very often, I don't think, but you did say that, and you said you did. And to your question, Carol, I'm interested in human nature and everything that humans do, good and bad and stuff in between, and how we're also part of nature. So, what do I mean by that? Friend, quote, said, we are nature, and if we're disconnected from nature, we're disconnected from ourselves. And another friend used to say, nature has the greatest imagination, but she guards her secrets jealously. So we have to extract certain truths about our nature and human nature. And that's what I am fascinated by. Music is the great way to do that kind of research. And so when President Obama says culture, I feel like all of us, it's not culture with a big C in a large hall that's all very, monumental. It's culture in our everyday lives and how we actually are human, and how the best way for us to live, for me, I think, and possibly for all of us, is how we combine our head and heart and hands and use ourselves. How we're trained to do great analytical thinking. But we also know that people who make great decisions actually have to go between the two neural pathways of analytical thinking and empathetic thinking. And if we can't get into the shoes of other people, we're not going to be able to make good decisions. And so that's my work. And so whether working with musicians or working with kids or older people, it's in a great city like Chicago, which has all the great neighborhoods and really has a sense of itself, the broad shoulders of Chicago. Well, yeah, because if I can understand Chicago, I can feel it in my bones, there's a greater chance for me to understand not only the rest of the country, but the rest of the world. We have a Ukrainian population here. We have the Mexican population. We have the Polish population. We have the Russian population here. And so if we can understand ourselves, the rest is pie.
So I've got to ask this. What's up with you and Bruce Springsteen?
Look, Bruce, Yo-Yo, the best perk of the presidency was I could pretty much have anybody I like over at the White House. And they would perform, and then I'd hang out, and, you know, I generally resent them because they were more talented than me, and it seemed to be having more fun on a daily basis. But there's a reason why we did a lot of cultural programming at the White House. And it wasn't, you know, whether it was Lin-Manuel Miranda at a poetry event explaining how he was going to do a rap about the first Treasury Secretary. And we're all like, yeah, good luck with that. I'm sure it'll. I remember Michelle and I looked at each other, it's like, man, this is going to be terrible. Or it was Bob Dylan singing songs of the civil rights movement, or Aretha coming through and singing gospel. What Yo-Yo said about Chicago, it's true. One of the things I love about this town is it is as representative of, and Illinois generally, is as representative of the country as any place. It's north, south, east, west, urban, rural, suburban. Every immigrant group has landed on our doorstep. But what's true of Chicago is true of America, right? That's our strength. We are this remarkable experiment. The only large country that, and a superpower, the most powerful country on earth, but we're also this example, this experiment in, can a multiracial, multi-ethnic, multi-religious collection of people from every corner of the globe come together under a common creed, and despite their differences, live together, work together, celebrate together, mourn together, and create a better place. And I've written this before. Even all around the world, for all our flaws, all our mistakes, all the misguided or well-intentioned but ultimately fruitless forays we've had in foreign policy, everywhere people are still looking, thinking, can this actually work? And when it doesn't look like it's working, the world is a darker place. And those who have a different idea of how human societies can function are strengthened. And when America looks like it might be working, then that provides a glimmer of hope for people around the world. And and that experiment expresses itself in a lot of ways. One of its most powerful ways is in music. Right? There's a reason why we are an exporter of culture, because there's something in people all around the world that recognize, if they can get along, if you can pull Irish ballads and African rhythms and throw in a little bit of salsa, somebody pulls in a sitar, and somehow you've got rock and roll, and you've got jazz, and you've got blues, and you've got classical, and if that can work, well, maybe there's hope for us.
But right? Did the boss let you play with him? I mean, how did it go?
In his barn, yeah, but those recordings have been destroyed. I will tell you a story about Yo-Yo, though, that I think is indicative of his spirit. Because the thing is, he is a joyful person and a good soul. Right? You can't help but come away with spending time with him and, of course, listening to his music and not feel slightly more hopeful about the world. You were invited to some event. We had a lot of events. I don't remember what it was. But there was the way the White House is structured. There's the East Room and the State Room and all kinds of rooms and the Plate Room. I don't name them right. I was the worst tour guide of the White House because I didn't always get the terminology right. But there's a big hall. You kind of walk in from the north entrance. And a lot of times that's where we have receptions. And the president has this Marine band. And they're really good. And they can play anything. I mean, they're top notch. And these are folks they're Marines. And they're serving our country. But they are also extraordinary musicians. And so Yo-Yo was supposed to perform, and I think he actually had performed, and so his performance was over, and now you've got like a little trio playing just while everybody's chatting. And I'm talking with some muckety-mucks, and I look over, and Yo-Yo, suddenly he's just sat down, and he's with a woman Marine, I think maybe on violin, and you've got a African-American Marine, and you've got, a bald white guy Marine, and Yo-Yo sitting there, and they're just jamming, as if, they're like the house band. And he didn't, first of all, I thought what an extraordinary experience that would be for them to play with a master of Yo-Yo's stature. But it also was a reflective of America at its best, which is you can play music, sit down. Right? We don't check to see what your credentials were, what your status was supposed to be. If you can jam, let's play some music together. And that, I think, was indicative of not just Yo-Yo's spirit or those Marines, but it was also America at its best. That's what we do.
The only thing I can say to that is sometimes you don't know where your next job is coming from.
Did they know who you were at the Russian embassy? Did they know who you were at the Ukrainian embassy?
No.
You didn't call and say, I'm coming over?
I had a mask on, and, there are a lot of Asian cellists.
Good point.
Generic.
We know that President Obama is the hope guy, but I'm just curious, as we round this out before we hope we can persuade you to play for us, where do you get your hope? How do you keep it alive in an America that can test it, that business of hope from time to time?
By talking to ordinary people everywhere and finding out what their stories are. I mean, we all say we have heroes and models and this, true. But actually, if you go around anywhere, into any neighborhood, and you start to figure out what people's stories are and what they do in their daily lives, and if you're a single mother with 3 kids, and my daughter has 3 kids, I know what it's like to have, 3 little kids running around. But if you're a single mom, and you have to actually put food on the table, and you see what kind of heroism is involved. And I just think the heroes are everywhere. And when you see that kind of energy, and when you see people pulling together, there's a fire, there's a new neighbor comes in, you know, this thing that you call America, this experiment, and I love the word that you used, experiment, because it is an ongoing experiment. We're not proving anything. We have to prove it every single day in order for this experiment to work. And you see these families and people that are actually pulling things together in order to make it work in the small towns and the big towns, city blocks, urban areas, and it's beyond social demographics.
Yeah, I think that's right.
And that's beautiful. That's where the hope comes from. And yes, you get hope when Zelensky comes and says, you know, I'm putting my life on the line. And suddenly we all pull together and say, yeah, we've been very comfortable. We haven't thought about this, but someone is actually doing it, and it makes us sit up a little straighter.
Amen to that. Amen to that.
And I want to pick up on something he says, because you mentioned, Lester mentioned, we're building the Obama Presidential Center here.
Will you invite me?
Yes.
Please?
Yes. We're going to put you to work.
I want to.
I know.
To work.
The entire premise of our programming is exactly what Yo-Yo just said. You know what? I came first to Chicago as a community organizer. And what I learned from working out in the neighborhoods of the South Side was everybody's got a story. And those stories are sacred. And if you take the time to hear them, you will see the quiet heroism that people are living out every single day. And you'll also see the connections between people. And when I asked myself what was the most important thing I could do post-presidency, it was, how do we train a whole new generation of leaders? Not leaders who necessarily run for Congress, doesn't have to be folks who are holding high office, but people who are working every day in their communities to build bridges, to make connections, to be helpful, to express kindness through action, to make our institutions more responsive, to live out our values. And it turns out that if you ask me what gives me hope, all across this country there are young people doing that right now, as we speak, often without a lot of fanfare. And this generation coming behind us is as thoughtful, idealistic, innovative, bold as any generation. They're certainly smarter and more sophisticated than my generation. We've taught them to be cynical about some of our existing institutions, big government, big media, big politics, big business. But when given a chance, they are prepared to remake those institutions to to better reflect the values that we believe in. And what turns out to be true in the United States is true overseas. So in addition to the thousands of young people that we're training here in the United States, the hundreds we're working with here in Chicago, in Europe, in Africa, in Asia, same cohorts, and I'd meet them when I was traveling around the world. We'd always have town hall meetings with young leaders. Right now, as we speak, we have alumni of our programming in Europe that includes a woman who's partially blind, who, in Ukraine, who organized one of the foremost disabilities movements in Ukraine, who had to flee from her home with her 15-year-old son for the Romanian border. And the reason she was able to leave Ukraine was because another leader in Romania, who's a human rights and pro-democracy activist, contacted her and arranged it. They had met together in programmings that we had done. We've got young people in Amsterdam and Germany, including the youngest member of the legislature in Germany who went through our programs, who are setting up refugee housing as we speak. And when you listen and hear what they are doing and the courage and conviction with which they're doing it, that'll make you hopeful. And the question is, how do we create platforms and structures to give them the training, the support, the resources, so that their voices are heard? Because if we can clear a path for them, they will save us. I believe the views of Putin will ultimately lose. I believe that that impulse inside all of us to bully our way through problems and to put people down, to lift ourselves up, and to be fearful and resentful towards others and suspicious of people who don't look like us or think the way we do. I believe that ultimately that vision will lose, but only if what a pretty good politician from Illinois called the better angels by nature is lifted up. And as Yo-Yo said, that is not something we can just do occasionally. All of us in our lives, every single day, have to contribute to lifting up those voices, and that's what we're trying to do with the foundation. That's what Yo-Yo does with his music. That's what you've done in the past, Carol, with your good reporting, and there are a lot of people here who are doing it through all kinds of charitable and civic activities, but we got to pick up our game if we're going to ultimately not just deliver for the people of Ukraine, but for our children and our grandchildren.
On that note, let's give a warm thank you to President
Good to
Obama
see everybody.
and Yo-Yo
Good to be
Ma.
home. Thank you.
And we will persuade. Can we?
Who's going to play it a little bit?
So are we going to? We're going to get you. Stay right there.